Hey there, this is Travis Willingham, and you're listening to DDO Players News Podcast.
It's DDO Players, and we are privileged to have on the Skype call right now with us Mr. Travis Willingham.
How are you, sir?
I am good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I've got my coffee. I'm just laying here naked in my room talking to you.
That is way too much information, but okay, thanks for sharing. I can see how this is going to go.
Yeah, we like to set the tone early.
Hey, there you go. Of course, Travis is well known as a voice actor. A lot of people in the Dungeons & Dragons circle will know him as Grog from Critical Role.
Yes, the beloved Grog Strongjaw.
Which we will be talking about, of course. And then he recently did some work, some voiceover work for Dungeons & Dragons Online, which we are going to talk about as well. But we'll warm you up here at first, though. Let's talk about your work as a voice actor.
Yes.
What made you decide to get into voice acting?
You know, I started out acting in Dallas, Fort Worth. I went to school at TCU in Fort Worth and was a big fan of Dragon Ball Z while I was in school. I was just super taken with the show, and a couple of my friends and I were watching the show one afternoon, and we happened to actually stick around for the credits, and I saw my now wife's name, Laura Bailey, roll up the screen in the credits, and I had a very small heart attack because I knew that Laura Bailey had the same talent agent as that I did in Dallas at the time. And when we were in Dallas, we were just doing basically anything we could get our hands on in the Dallas area. You know, it's a decent hub in terms of production, but it was mostly commercial auditions, you know, some guest starring roles on any TV shows that were playing there, and maybe some movie stuff, but you know, pretty slim pickings. And so when I saw her name on this animated series that I loved so much, I called my agency and I was like, oh, please, can I have Laura's number? She's on the show and I want to find out how she did it. And our agent gave me her number and I called, and I didn't keep my cool at all. I was like, oh my God, you're on this show. How is that possible? And she kind of acted like she didn't know who I was. Like I was some sort of strange stalker.
Like, who is this stalker guy that's calling me, and why is he calling?
Exactly. And she explained that Funimation Productions was operating just outside of Fort Worth, where I was already going to school, and that she was working on this show there, and they had the other properties that they were recording as well. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I had never considered, recording voices for animated projects or video games. I mean, for me as a kid, you know, I was raised on cartoons just like everybody else, and maybe a little longer as well. I like to say that instead of getting like a great music education from my parents, whether it be the Beatles or, you know, Rolling Stones or whatever, I was raised on Disney. So I never really put two and two together that those voices were actual people. Like Lion-O from Thundercats was alive on Thundera, and that was it. You know,
exactly. That's right.
I would have been devastated if I knew that was some, you know, middle-aged man screaming into a microphone. I didn't want to hear that. So I had never considered that was something that was done, or much less that you could be paid for it. You know, that happened somewhere that I didn't know anything, or I just didn't know anything about. And when she told me this production house was there, I was like, oh, please, you've got to get me an audition over there. And I think I hassled her for 2 to 3 years.
Oh, wow.
I'd see, well, you know, and we were still in college, and I would see her at different auditions and stuff. And I was like, hey, sure would love an audition over at Funimation if you want to put in a good word. I'm not terrible. I promise I'll make you look good. She's like, oh yeah, sure. And just kept blowing me off. And I'm sure she got that from a lot of people, but you know, I was hoping that she would introduce me. And sure enough, after a little bit of time, I did an independent film with Mike McFarland, who turned out to be a fantastic director for the Full Metal Alchemist series. And he introduced me to Justin Cook, one of the execs over there, and they brought me in for an audition for Full Metal. And that was one of the very first roles I ever had at Funimation. I think the very first one was just to make sure that I could, that I wouldn't waste their time behind a microphone, which was good because I really sucked in the beginning. I mean, I was terrible.
I find that hard to believe.
No. It's been over a decade now, and I promise you, if you do anything for a decade or longer, you're going to be way better at it than when you started.
Well, that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I luckily I'm a little bit of a quick learner, and I really enjoyed sort of the challenge of only being able to use your voice to convey everything else that you need to get across in a scene, or what, whether it's intention or whether it's anger, or developing a character, the sound of a character. And I just kind of I just tried to learn from everybody that I was around, and I had the good fortune of being in a place like Funimation, and I learned from incredible actors like Chris Sabat and Damian Clark, Laura Bailey, of course. Troy Baker also cut his teeth on voiceover over at Funimation back in the day. So it was this small little subsection of just some incredible talent before we each moved out to Los Angeles to pursue bigger things at a later time. And even after moving from Dallas to LA, I still didn't know if voiceover was going to be something that I could do all that frequently, because again, you just expect it to be something that's done by an elite few, and you wouldn't even know how to break into that world. And we get the same sort of questions from people that are considering going into voiceover that we had back in the day. And after just a lucky set of auditions and doing well and not dropping the ball when opportunity presented itself, we just found ourselves in more and more projects, and we're kind of where we are today, and we're incredibly grateful.
So how do you go about preparing for a voiceover job? Because I know it's probably different than regular acting.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare for that?
There are a couple of things. If it's your first session, right, and you auditioned for the job, let's say, you probably send in a take that we always like to call is just a shot in the dark, right? You don't really know what they're looking for. There may be a character description, maybe there's a name, and maybe if you're super lucky, they actually sent an image of what the character looks like, because then you can go like, oh, okay, I see what he looks like. He's tall, or he's short, he's really large, or he's really small, he's kind of wiry, he's older, he's younger. I feel like the voice is going to sound like this. That will help narrow it down. Sometimes you just get a name and that he's a grizzled old captain who's retired and he doesn't trust anybody but has a heart of gold. And you're like, oh, okay, whatever. So sometimes it's literally just taking a shot at what you think that voice sounds like as you're reading the dialogue, and just coming up with the idea of a character in your head. I mean, it's really up to your imagination, which is why D&D is so great, because that's all it is just, whatever
Right, yeah.
the theater of your own imagination. So you just kind of make it up in your head, and if they decide to book you on that, then maybe that's what they want. Sometimes they'll book you and go like, hey, we heard your audition, loved what you did, we want to make a few changes, and you right then and there have to be able to change the sound, change the inflection, change the pitch, and just be really flexible with what either the client or the producers are looking for. And in terms of getting ready, if you go to play a sport, you normally like stretch beforehand, make sure you warm up. And everybody has like different rituals, usually in the car as they're on their way to a specific voiceover session, especially if it's going to be a vocally stressful one, if there's going to be a lot of yelling, or if the voice is hard to maintain. I find that most actors like to sing in the car, and I am no exception. So
Really?
if you ever pull up next to me on a Los Angeles freeway on my way to a session, you may see me singing my ever-loving guts out to some Hamilton, which is the current choice of music
awesome.
at the moment. Yeah, there you go.
So you've done a wide variety of voice acting work. Do you have like a favorite genre? Or I know that's kind of a hard question to ask.
No, actually, it's not. And it changes. I think like anything, and especially in a profession like voice acting, where we get to do animation, we get to do interactive titles. I would say in the beginning we were doing more video games, and so at the time, about 10 years ago, I was in love with first person shooters. So my dream was to be in the Call of Duties, the Black Ops, the Battlefields, those sorts of games, and I wanted to yell RPG and grenade and incoming. So I had a fascination with that. And then after that had been done, I really wanted to get into some more of the RPG type games, because I thought the dialogue was better. And so, we got to knock that off the list as well. And then it really became kind of a goal of mine to do a little bit more animation, just because the character work is there. You have to be a little more flexible. The energy can be a lot higher sometimes. So I would say currently I always enjoy narrative-driven gameplay. So I think the interactive titles that are really good at building in some decent material for actors to chew in their games, like the Telltale games, for instance, are fantastic. Naughty
Yes, they
Dog
are. Yeah.
also makes some just incredible dialogue for its actors, whether it's the Uncharted series or The Last of Us. To me, those are kind of like those are like the Olympic columns that every actor strives to stand under in terms of, dialogue for an actor. And I think Telltale's doing a fantastic job, especially with their new Batman game, delivering a fresh take on some characters that everybody knows really well in the Batman universe, but really lets the story go in a new direction. And as an actor in it, I feel like it's just super refreshing and invigorating, especially given what you know about these very well-known characters.
So the final voice acting question I have for you is going to
Okay.
be the hardest, probably. You have done tons of characters over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite?
I have a couple favorites. And it's funny, like my buddy Troy Baker has a bunch of different tattoos, right? And I've always wanted a tattoo, but I haven't gotten one yet. And I ask him, what is it about tattoos that you love so much? And he says, they remind me of different periods of my life. And when I see that tattoo, it reminds me of where I was in that moment. And I think that the same can be said for kind of my favorites in voice acting, because Colonel Roy Mustang was not only one of my first roles, but it was one of my favorites because he was such a well-written character. I learned so much about the craft while I was doing it. It was a challenge, and he was just an incredibly well-rounded, well-written part to play. After that, I'm a huge comic book nerd, and being able to play Thor for the last 4 or 5 years for Marvel has just been nothing short of a dream come true. Being able to yell for Asgard, taste my Mjolnir. I don't think he ever says taste, but I just decided to say that now. Those sorts of things are little mini dreams come true, and I think those two probably wrap up, just kind of little warm places in my heart for the roles that I've had.
Okay, let's transition into Critical Role.
Yes.
How in the world did you get involved with Critical Role?
It's so weird. We at Critical Role, the High Council of Critical Role, don't even understand ourselves how it really happened or is continuing to happen. We kick it back to this one nexus point. Liam O'Brien, great friend of ours, amazing actor and director, knew that a few of us had been asking questions and kicking around the idea of maybe playing a game of D&D, right? I had never played before, never played in high school, never played in college. And a couple of the voice actors out here that we run around with had said, like, oh, it's so much fun. And, you play for hours. And I just thought it was this great mystery. In my mind, it was like you went into some guy's basement and there were candles and there was some sort of blood sacrifice. And then, you
That sounds like an awesome game, actually.
I know, right? It sounds like a great setting for a campaign.
Heck yeah.
And, Liam had said, like, okay, that's it. You guys have asked enough. For my birthday, I want us all to get together and roll some dice, rock out some pen and paper, and play some D&D. And I was like, oh, man, are you serious? We're going to do this? Okay, let's go. And we got together, and Matthew Mercer, who I had done numerous jobs with and always was asking him questions about D&D, and he was more than willing to talk about it and to share, and it just increased my my curiosity every time we talked. He was the DM, and I remember going over to Matthew's apartment, and I was one of the last people to arrive there because I was leaving another gig. And everyone else had been there for about a half an hour, and I walked in, and there was a large table set up with some sort of giant screen that all of his paperwork was behind. There were all these miniatures and dice everywhere. Everyone's sitting around it. There are a couple candles lit for ambiance, but he has an iPad that's playing this very Renaissance-style music, and everyone is speaking in these incredibly RP British accents. And I was immediately uncomfortable. I was like, oh no, it's happened. I missed the ritual. We sat down, I remember my face flushing because I was like, what is happening? And he turned to me and said, you notice a gentleman walking out of the woods. Would you like to tell us your name and who you are? And I remember in the prep for it, he was like, I need you to pick a class and I need you to pick a race and a name for your character and we'll go from there. And I had picked the largest class the largest race that I possibly could, which was a Goliath. He gave me the option of a Goliath, even though it's normally a half orc. And I wanted to be a barbarian because I didn't want to use any magic. The idea of being a magic user was super intimidating. I took a look at, wizard and sorcerer and warlock. And I was like, nope, far too complicated for my
I just
simple
want
brain.
to beat things up.
I just want to hit things. That sounds super easy. And I sat down and I was like, hello, it's a pleasure seeing you. And he was like, well, tell us your name, good sir. And I was like, I forgot to pick a name. And I don't know why my brain went back to my love for Monkey Island. But I was like, he's tall, he's huge, he's barbaric. Let's call him Grog. He's like, all right, Grog. And that's where Grog Strongjaw came from. And, over the next 5 hours or whatever it was that we played, we had a fantastic time. Many libations were had. And we left going like, that was really great. We should do it again. And, every 5 or 6 weeks, maybe even longer, we would, get back together again and take another turn at it. So that happened for about 2 years until Felicia Day and Geek and Sundry were like, it sounds like you guys have a really cool game. Would you want to come on our stream and roll dice in front of the cameras, which we thought was an even crazier idea.
Yeah, exactly.
We were like, nobody's going to want to watch that. It doesn't sound fun at all. And, we did it once and had a great time and people seemed to enjoy watching it. And the rest is kind of history.
So how'd you come up with the voice that you do for Grog?
I mean, similar to the way that we kind of come up with an idea of a character in a job.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, if he's a half giant, half human, he's got gray colored skin, he's got sort of tribal markings all over him. And this was before we had any sort of character art. It just lives in your head. He's this huge guy. He's barbaric, so he's probably got a bunch of animal skins. Okay, cool. Oh, his name's Grog. Okay, we're going in a certain direction here. And then when you roll the character, and he got that intelligence rating of 6.
Which I think you're known for at this point.
Yeah. I was like, that one number says more about my entire character than almost any of the others. Sure, he's strong, he's got a lot of charisma, but that intelligence rating is really something. And I was like, okay, now I know exactly who he is. He's this big dumb, lovable brute that at sometimes has a heart of gold and is way too impulsive for his own good. And I just really liked the idea of a character that was, too big for this world, was constantly smashing into things, was making as many poor decisions as he was good ones. And I just thought that the 3, I guess are they trolls in The Hobbit that try to cook Bilbo over the fire and eventually are turned to stone by Gandalf?
Yes.
Yeah, those guys in the movie, they all have this kind of like, Cockney, very working class. And I was like, that is exactly what Grog sounds like. And so that's just sort of what we adopted.
And I know you kind of touched on it when you were talking about your voice acting work, but do you find it hard not to have a script for this and you're just kind of doing whatever? Or do you kind of like that better? That way you can like take the character any way you want to?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mismatch of terror and adrenaline all at the same time, because in the beginning of almost every game, if we were more dedicated and professional actors, I'm sure we'd be like warming up, doing some improv back and forth so that we're nice and warm. But we don't. We're stupid. We usually show up about 10 minutes right beforehand because we're coming from a job and we're trying to throw some food in our gullets. And as soon as the show starts, we're off and running. So some of us are pretty cold right when we get there. And the first few minutes are normally a little bit of a warm-up period. There have been some where we're right off to the races as soon as we start. But normally it's like trying to get into the groove. And, scripted dialogue is one thing. But really when you're coming up with it yourself, you really just got to like trust the other people that are in your group, trust your instincts as an actor. And it makes the moments that do work really, really well, it makes those moments sing even more, and it makes them more precious as well, because you're coming up with it on the fly. It's a group effort. No moment is ever just one person. It's usually, bouncing off of Matt or bouncing off of Sam or Laura or Marisha, whoever it is.
And I think that's what makes Critical Role work so well is you guys just can bounce off of each other like that so well. And it just seems like, I think to, at least to me, and I think to a lot of the people watching, it seems scripted, even though it's not, just because how good you guys are with each other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that we value our group so much is that we were doing this before, anybody was watching. We really just enjoyed each other's company and this little thing that we take pleasure in every once in a while. And for us, we weren't a group that was casted to perform with each other. We weren't chosen to try and complement each other or to create a balance in our group. It's just us, and we have real chemistry as friends first. And we just happened, I think, to pick a really well-balanced group that complements each other in terms of what our characters are and, what they have and what they don't have.
So, speaking of your character, how much of Grog is you yourself, or is there any in there? Or are you totally different than Grog?
Man, I think most people would be, well, I would say they would be surprised to hear, but there are probably quite a few that are not surprised to hear that there's actually a large part of myself that's in Grog.
Really?
I often say that playing Grog is surprisingly easy for me because the first thing that pops into my head is normally what goes straight to my mouth. And that might worry a few people, except that if you really think about it, over the span of your life, you still have all these random impulsive thoughts that immediately pop in your head, but because you've gained wisdom and you know better, or that
Right, yeah.
that might offend somebody. Or
this is not going to end well if I say this. So.
Correct. Yeah. If you take all those barriers that have been built over 30 plus years, you wind up with a person that has an intelligence of 6 and, doesn't really think before he speaks, doesn't measure his actions, has no foresight. So it's actually quite easy to play kind of a bumbling idiot, I mean, there are a couple moments, and that's really all that improv is. It's just trusting your instincts and going for it. There's nothing that's really, you can't really do anything wrong. And if you just embrace that idea, it works really well. But for Grog, it's just listening to other people. I remember when Liam was trying to convince me not to trade with another merchant, and he said, Grog, do you know what math is? And the last 2 words out of his mouth were math is, and I just went, Mathis? And it's like, I probably had another thing in my holster ready to say, but it was just too good to hear Mathis and go
right.
like, oh, who's Mathis? And it's just things like that make playing him really fun because we all check ourselves. We're all very aware of what we say, aware of what we do, aware of how we behave other people and what other people think of us. And Grog for me is super therapeutic because he doesn't care about any of those things. I don't even know if he is aware of that exists. So that's what makes him so fun.
Do you have like a favorite moment from the show so far? You could even go back to even before it was actually on and it was just you guys playing if you want.
I mean, there was one moment pre-stream, but before people were watching, where Liam's character Vax had come over and late at night. The Grog and Vax prank wars have existed for a long time, and he came over while we were resting around a campfire and wrote with a piece of charcoal "dork" on my forehead. And I woke up in the morning, and in looking at my shiny chalice, I saw the reflection of the letters on my forehead, and I, in a very Grog moment, with the reflection of it, I said, oh, what does cord mean? K-O-R-D, except dork backwards is actually K-R-O-D, which would be crod.
Right.
And I said, oh, I mean crod. And like the whole table just fell out because it was, everybody's going, oh no,
that's awesome.
Leading into Grog. Oh no. Which was a simple mistake. But during the stream, whether it was Mathis or if it was headbutting the Fomorian, which I knew nobody at the table wanted me to do, but I felt like Matt was personally going, like, what are you going to do? He just destroyed your cask of ale. What are you going to do? Are you going to let it slide? Or are you going to be true to your character? And I think most recently the alchemy jug that produced the bit of mayonnaise was just a fantastic moment. You know, it was another one of those things where Laura and Sam were talking, and she set me up with, oh, do you have a jug of mayonnaise now? And all I could think of was Grog going, I'm going to eat all of this mayonnaise. So there have been a few that, and I laugh just as hard at Grog as other people. I sometimes I can barely keep my eyes dry because it's just the sheer stupidity of it is so much fun to me.
So are you surprised with the reaction that you have guys gotten from the show?
Constantly. At all times, we are surprised. We really didn't think anybody would enjoy watching us. We knew that we were having fun, but we weren't really sure that would translate in any way. So when we receive the fan art that comes in after every episode, we're floored. When we receive the messages that we do about what it means to certain people, or how they're now being introduced to D&D, or they're looking into DMing their own games with their friends, or it's helped them through a rough time, or they really needed a lifting of their spirits during the week. Those are all reactions that mean the world to us. We were doing the show for ourselves in the beginning, and we always will. But we know now that it means a lot to a lot of people, and that just makes it incredibly special.
In a few weeks ago, you guys were in Indianapolis at Gen Con. You guys had a panel there, and then you also did a live show. What was your reaction to that live show? Because that crowd was crazy.
It was nuts. It was pure adrenaline. There are a lot of us in the cast that have done a fair bit of theater in our time, and it's been a hot second since we've been back on a stage in that way, where you can just feel the audience's energy and you feed off of that. I can tell you, standing backstage, we were all so nervous, just so nervous. You can hear the 1,000+ people out there, just, the waves of applause and roaring, and they're all excited for it to happen, and then walking out and, people standing up and just sending you all that love and energy. It's just an incredible feeling that you can't get anywhere else. And it was just an amazing reaction. We joked later that we felt like we were on a sitcom set, because there wasn't anything that you could do that was missed by the audience. If you made a facial expression, or if you said something that was even slightly funny, there were hundreds of people that were laughing at it, and it would almost catch us off guard. It's just there's no environment like that, and so we really enjoyed that.
So let's transition into Dungeons & Dragons Online now. You were recently announced that you are going to do the voiceover work as the Dungeon Master in the new update 32 Against the Slave Lords.
Yeah, that's correct.
How did that come about that you got the voiceover work for Dungeons & Dragons Online?
Yeah, there was actually a message put into our agency here in LA, and they said, we got a request from Dungeons & Dragons Online if you would be interested in coming and doing some work for one of their expansions. And I said, my God, I wasn't even fully aware that was something that they, the voices were provided for. I said instantly I would love to do it. And I wanted a little bit more info, because I was just curious. Did they want me to play like some kind of crazy Fomorian? Did they want
right
monster voices? Were they looking to get Grog? And I said, no, it's actually where you are the voice of the Dungeon Master for certain areas of the game. And I just thought that was great. I've never DM'd. I've never tried to construct a campaign or bounce off a table full of players. But we had a little bit of fun coming up with the voice for it. We kind of landed somewhere around like a very mid-Atlantic Thor type voice for the regular Dungeon Master, and then of course I tried to do my best Matthew Mercer at giving each individual NPC that came along a different sound, and you really get a feeling of not only the incredible challenge that Matt has every night that we play, but also the amazing level of talent that he displays, being able to switch through those hats as quickly as he does. And it was just a lot of fun. I got to channel my best Matthew Mercer impression. So I would hope that people would sense a little bit of Matthew's storytelling as I'm going through and kind of illustrating what's happening.
So how much input did you have on the actual voices that you used?
I would say total. They were very open to just kind of whatever popped into my crazy brain. And a lot of times in sessions, producers or clients that will hire you will have a very set idea of what they're looking for. And it's always a real treat for actors when they say, hey, I just want to see what you come up with. We're incredibly flexible. We want to hear what your take on this is. And it was nice landing on kind of a voice that was not exactly my own for the regular dungeon master. And then, whether it was, an older elderly woman or a very sly, sort of scandalous merchant. I think there may have been one time where they were like, let's try a different voice because that might have sounded similar to another character. But, other than that, they were just kind of excited to see what I came up with as we went along.
So how different was the work that you did for DDO versus other video games that you have done? Or was it pretty similar?
There's a lot that's similar, just in that, it's a collaborative process. So you're learning as you go along. Things change on the fly. You've got to stay flexible, but I really enjoyed it because it had the feel of a D&D campaign. I've never had the chance to play D&D online, but knowing that there's someone that is sort of giving you that storytelling aspect as you're playing,
right?
I feel like that's an aspect of the game that isn't present in other RPGs. There are NPCs that come along and fill you in on the story, and maybe there's direction that's filled in along the bottom of the screen, but there's no real set storyteller that says, as you move along down this hallway, you notice a lantern on your left that has a small engraving on it. You approach it. That sort of stuff I think is just very, it's just invaluable in terms of someone that goes from a real world D&D campaign to playing it online.
So is there anything that stood out the most to you about you for being the DM voice?
That's a good question. I feel like even though I didn't come up with the expansion for D&D Online, you feel sort of this parent responsibility to the player in the campaign because you are guiding them not only through the story, but then you're also responsible for providing color to the interactions that they have.
Right.
So this weird sort of ownership starts to happen, almost secondary ownership, where you really start to feel responsible for what's happening in the story, which was, I guess, a sensation I wasn't really expecting to have. It was really pretty special.
So you said you kind of enjoyed your work and you had never DM before. So has this maybe inspired you to try your hand at being the Dungeon Master?
It has a little bit. The curiosity is certainly there. I think I also know myself, and I'm easily repelled in the player's handbook when I reach the magic user sections, and I know as a DM you need to be fairly familiar with those classes and the rules of them in case one of your players selects it, which they're bound to do. So the sheer amount of homework I think that would be involved in DMing is probably something that's gonna keep my busy mind from venturing into it. However, if there was ever a point where, let's say, a DM with an intelligence of 6 could start a campaign, maybe there's something there.
That would actually be fun. That would be pretty amazing now that you say that.
It may be fun, it may be chaotic, but it would certainly be something.
It would indeed. All right, just have one more question for you here, and then we can let you go because I know we've taken a lot of your time this morning. Aside from DDO, do you have any other projects that's coming up that you can talk about? I'm sure there's a ton that you can't.
Yeah, sure. We always joke that our lives are a giant King James version of an NDA Bible.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
can't say anything. But yeah, currently the Telltale Batman series is out for PlayStation 4, I think, and Xbox One as well. And Troy Baker plays Bruce Wayne in Batman. Laura Bailey plays Selena Kyle, Catwoman, and I'm playing Harvey Dent. Episode 1 released early in August, and I really encourage people to give it a look. It's a really interesting take on the Batman lore, and more specifically on using Bruce Wayne as a tool outside of the Batman cowl, sort of in your ability to shape what's happening behind Gotham. It's fascinating. And then other than that, there are a few. Man, it's tough. It's hard to remember what exactly you can.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably is.
About. Let's see.
And I can always edit it if you say something that you're not supposed to, too.
Right.
It's like, oh, hey, I can't say that. Oh, okay, you never said it. Nobody's ever going to hear it.
Let's see. Avengers on Disney XD is still up and running, and there's a new season of that coming. What else? Can't talk about that. I'm actually looking at my calendar now to figure out, what all we can say. I think that probably covers it. Telltale's super new and fresh, so that's probably a good one.
And I know you've mentioned your wonderful wife, Laura Bailey, a couple times. What's it like working with her?
Laura is first and foremost just an incredible actor.
I agree totally, 100%.
I remember seeing not only being a fan of her work in various animated projects, but I remember the first time that we actually were able to work together on a set and just being guilty of just staring. Just watching. Her talent is so incredible, and her takes and her instincts, I think, are just so rare in this industry. She just has an amazing feel for what she can do, and just such confidence in her acting. There are a lot of times where we more often find ourselves at odds in projects when we get to work together. So whether it's, Harvey Dent and Selena Kyle and Telltale, or Fetch and Reggie and Infamous Second Son, we're usually on other ends of objectives in the game. And so we find ourselves yelling at each other, or having these lines where we're in a fight or an argument, and one half of your brain is going, okay, I'm in character, I'm doing whatever I can to get under this person's skin. However, if you do it effectively enough, I may get a look that is very Laura, which makes my insides turn to ice.
The drive home's going to be interesting, probably.
Right. Which, you have to kind of check in with each other afterwards, or at least I feel like you do. And 10 out of 10 times, Laura comes up and goes, no, I'm just in character, it's fine. And 10 out of 10 times, I'm going, oh man, she's going to kill me.
Oh, she's pissed. Oh, right. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we look forward to hearing your work in Dungeons & Dragons Online as the DM, and of course your work in Batman and everything else you do. And we thank you for taking a little time out of your morning to have a little chat with us.
Oh man, it was my absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing it come out, and I can't wait to see what people think of it.
All right, thanks so much, Travis.
All right, my man.